Awesome. Welcome to our Capital Infrastructure Plan or CIP teach-in here today, sponsored by LA Forward Institute. For folks who are newer to LA Forward Institute, we've got a slide for you. I think it's on the next slide. LA Forward Institute is a nonprofit organization where we're supporting folks to activate in their local democracies, period, because we're living at a time. But even before this time, I don't actually think that we were doing a good job living out democracy and what it promises to us. If we were a working democracy, we would already be in community together, aware of each other's issues, having each other's backs, and understanding the bridges to our local governments to be able to make changes happen. We are on this call particularly today because in our democracy, we all experience something called infrastructure. That's like the built environment, material world that we experience when we leave our doors, if we have doors, first of all, if we leave our homes and emerge into our streets in our neighborhoods, what do those things look like? How do we experience them? Today, we're going to dig into those current realities and our dreams for what it could be. Right now, the city, as you will learn, is undergoing a process called a capital infrastructure plan where we have not been invited as community members to participate in elevating our dreams as the city plans out its infrastructure. And that's why we're here today, because if we were a working democracy, we would have that community voice in that process. So guess what? We're spreading the word, and you all are going to be part of that work of elevating our voices. But first, we probably got to know what the opportunity is. So that's why you're here. Brendan, if you could go to the next slide. And just to be clear, this is not the only thing we work on at LA Forward Institute. This is one of 7 different issue groups that we've got. So you're here focused on this particular issue of infrastructure. Um, Here's what we're going to do. In a moment, Tracy, one of our volunteers and community members here at LA Forward, is going to lead us through an exercise where we're taking a little bit of an inventory of what our current realities are, our experiences of infrastructure, and what our dreams are of infrastructure that we could have. And we're going to do that because, again, we want to prove to ourselves we actually do have opinions here. We've got perspectives. So we're going to inventory our perspectives first. Then Brendan who is co-leads our capital infrastructure plan working group as a volunteer, is going to loop you in on what exactly has been happening with this capital infrastructure plan. And so you're going to get a lot of like facts and details, including insight into the types of decisions that are being made without us. And then I'll come back sort of later in the call to help us think about the space that LA Forward Institute is trying to create, and hopefully you all bring to your organizations, your neighborhood councils, your communities. So that way we're not at LA Forward Institute the only ones talking about a capital infrastructure plan. It's got to be a citywide conversation, and we're starting it with you. And so just know, like, have your hat on about how you're going to bring this conversation to more people beyond this, because we're going to ask you at the end what you hope to do about it. Cool? Got it. I'm gonna pass to Tracy to get us started. You're on mute, Tracy. You have a voice.
I
That's what
have a
we're here
voice.
for.
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I'm here for. Okay, so take 2. Hi, my name is Tracy Michelle Porter, and as Godfrey said, I'm a volunteer here for LA Forward. I've been with them for now 2 years, and I'm very excited to be part of this process. So, as you see, we have these questions about infrastructure. But when you walk out of your house or your home, like Godfrey says, what do you see? What do you smell? What comes to mind? But mostly, what's missing? So I'm gonna put in the chat a document that you guys can just click on it and add to it. So I have on here your current realities and what are your dreams and and the outcomes of what you think your neighborhood should be. Because I live in Encino now, and so LA is different from Encino to South LA. I grew up in South LA along the Crenshaw corridor and all the things. And so when I go home, because I still consider that my home, I don't like what I see. I see jacked up sidewalks. I see smells. I see garbage. Like when I first moved to my neighborhood, in some parts of the neighborhood, they have the trash is put out in the alleyways and the trash trucks come there. These alleyways are so clean. They look like, you could, I'm not saying you could eat off the, the ground, but it's a stark contrast to when I go to, like, over by USC or whatever, and see the garbage in the street and the garbage in the alleyways. How do people live like that? So my question is, and I like definitely like people to put this in the on the document. What do you dream that your neighborhood should look like? What do you want your neighborhood to look like? And also definitely put in your current realities, because I know I drive a cab and I'm all over LA County. And I was telling somebody earlier, when I drive into the airport, there's a I go a back way, and there's the stench that, and I'm thinking, this is what people are going to smell when they come to LA for the Olympics, for all the things that are going to be happening, or just regular visitors. And I'm like, and then the traffic and how much traffic we have. So I think about these things, and I think about the fact that there's no plan to deal with this. And this is why we're here, because not only is there no plan, but there is like one plan that we're not a part of, and this is our city. We should have a voice in everything that we do, everything that happens, especially with our tax dollars. It should not be hidden in backroom deals and all these other things, because ultimately it's going to affect us on the long in the long term. So, like I said, oh gosh, you guys are really going for it. So definitely keep writing on what you think of, and I'm going to pass it next to Brendan.
Yeah. Thank you all for filling this out. It's been great to see all these anonymous animals having issues with infrastructure, but also dreaming about what it could be like, what they would like to see. So I'm gonna flip back to the presentation here. So what we've talked about has been very personal. What we see, what we hear or smell just in our own neighborhoods, and then what we would like to see. And I want to zoom out for a second just to take a look at what the broader city is like. So for the city of LA, we've got 4 million people, 468 square miles, over 200 neighborhoods, and about 7,500 miles of streets. Said differently, it's a massive city. But in tandem with that massive city, we have a governance structure that doesn't necessarily address the needs of everyday people. We have over 19 different stakeholders from various departments to the city council to the mayor's office. We have a pretty chaotic 1-year budgeting cycle that doesn't really allow us to invest long-term into our infrastructure or the city at large. But then, generally speaking, we don't really have a unified plan or project list or even an inventory of our assets. So the city doesn't really know how many streetlights we have. And so with these realities in mind and the scope of the city, these are some of the results. We've got 50,000 pending sidewalk repairs, a 10-year backlog for certain repairs, ultimately culminating in inconsistent investments and services across our neighborhoods. So as Tracy mentioned, the stark differences become even greater as these, as city governance is not, addressed, or the infrastructure is not addressed. And then we've all heard about the $1 billion budget deficit, and that's going to continue to get worse. Because if we look ahead, if we don't address our infrastructure now, or we don't take steps to reform how our city views our infrastructure, we're going to see a rising budget deficit. And one of the main causes of, or a big contributor, are liabilities for people who have tripped over broken sidewalks. Those are potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of repairs in exchange for millions of dollars of penalties. But also, we saw what happened with the susceptibility to our city with disasters like the Eaton and Palisades fires, and how much of a strain that put on the city. And if we don't have a clear plan, it's unlikely that areas that have historically received underinvestment, that they suddenly will see it. And of course, we have multiple global sporting events coming to Los Angeles, and without strong infrastructure or something to at least prop us up, it's going to be a difficult, to say the least, series of global sporting events. But with all of these issues and potential implications in mind, the mayor's office did start in October 2024, start the process to create a capital infrastructure plan, or CIP, through Executive Directive 9, which basically said, we're going to start to lay the foundation to create a CIP, which is a 5 to 10 year budget for infrastructure for investment and maintenance of infrastructure that does three main things. It sets a vision for the entire city, one that every department and sub-bureau, council, the public, all of us are on the same page, that we agree with how we want to invest in our city going forward. It also gets very specific. It talks about what's the project, where is it going to happen, when will it happen, and who's responsible. And it lays all of the, and then additionally, we have identifies funding. So this entire plan commits the city and all of its inhabitants to a vision about how we're going to invest in the city, what projects we'll invest in, and all of the underlying details. I would argue that one of the ways, as Godfrey mentioned in the chat, you can see a variety of different ways to say CIP, but in a sense, it is comprehensive as well. But interestingly enough, LA is the only major city without a CIP. We are, relatively speaking, falling very far behind, not just compared to other populous cities or cities in California, but even within LA County itself. We are surrounded by cities that have CIPs. And just to give an example of what this could look like, what we have up here on the screen are a couple screenshots from San Diego's CIP. So on the left, you'll see this color-coded map, and every single color is a different infrastructure project that when you click into it, you'll come into this dashboard where you can see factors like I had talked about. You see who's responsible, when's it going to get done, what the finances are. Basically, it allows for far more transparency into what the city is doing and when they're going to do it. And so with the CIP, some of the outcomes that we see, both on the city and just individual basis, are enhanced collaboration and efficiency, and also additional cost savings. You know, the city is already spending a ton of money, but how do we spend that more effectively? How do we also make sure that our decisions are informed by data? You know, as we mentioned before, the city doesn't have an inventory system. So how could we possibly ensure, you know, the standards of our infrastructure if we don't really know what's in there? But then for Angelenos, it's to ensure that our public spaces are safe and accessible, that people could go out and actually enjoy the city that they live in. We also want to make sure that a CIP is able to address historic investment disparities. Certain areas, simply put, have not received the investment that they need to be kept to the same standard as other parts of Los Angeles. And so this is a way to not equalize, but ensure that investment is equitable across the board. And then, of course, we just want to have better infrastructure, make sure it's maintained and it stays maintained for a lot longer. And so I know we talked a little bit about outcomes at the very beginning, but I also, you know, having said a lot right here, I want to give us an opportunity to go back to the this document here, which I see has gotten much longer since I last looked at it. But are there any other outcomes, you know, specific things in your neighborhood that you might like to see, or ways that you see the CIP addressing something that you've been thinking about for a long time? And so I want to give us, you know, a couple minutes to think about that, add some more bullets here, even though we have a pretty comprehensive list. And I think, Godfrey, you dropped that back in the chat, so people should have access to this. And of course, if anyone is feeling particularly enthusiastic about this, you know, feel free to come off mute as well if you want to, you know, share your own initial reactions to, you know, CIP and what it could do for LA.
I'm thinking about how I like traverse the city. So I live in Koreatown. I'm a renter. And my apartment complex that I live in, it's like 19 units and it's like gated. And so already there's this like separation in my neighborhood between like when I walk out the door, the first thing I have to do is unlock a gate and then walk out into public space. And my sidewalks are jacked up. I think that was like the word on there. Like they are actually jacked up. There's a tree, love trees, but there's a tree whose roots are like pushing up the sidewalk, and it's like coming to a point where at least one neighbor has said, like, is this tree gonna fall? And we don't, and like it would fall on a car like that is parked or whatnot, And then uh my closest curb is like down the block. So if I'm like in a car, if I'm getting dropped off by a friend or whatnot, and let's say I've like maybe I just got picked up at the airport or something and getting dropped off. Like I got my like heavy bag, my wheelie thing, but I don't have anywhere close to my apartment to like get a heavy thing off of the sidewalk. I'm thinking about like wheelchairs, like things like that, bicycles, like getting it back on the sidewalk. So even this like experience of just the everyday getting in and out of my apartment, I'm already experiencing things that could be fixed. And I don't know. I like don't know what's on the city's radar. I don't know if this has been flagged. And there's like not an easy way to check this or to have it be prioritized. And then when I think about getting around the city, even I'm lucky I'm in Koreatown. I'm able to like walk to different metro stations, but I know like that's not true of others as well, and just even getting around the city. I know people who avoid parts of the city because of like um either like parking, lack of public transit, like getting there and being able to walk around. So those are some things that I'm thinking about that I see some people talking about. I just wanted to point out loud.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so different here in the valley, like when you think about the city. Like up here, we have these big long stretches of neighborhoods, and then we'll have like up where I live, it's kind of a more you'll have neighborhoods, then you'll have like more industrial areas where there's lots of like uh businesses, but also it's more like construction type businesses and things like that. But you can't just like really walk anywhere, like because there's no shade, there's inconsistent sidewalks, and like if I want to take public transit anywhere, I have to walk 2 blocks to get on a bus, take that bus for 20 minutes to get to the closest subway station, and then I can kind of get anywhere in the city. But I have to essentially plan that additional half hour before I can really get to a hub that can get me anywhere. And that bus that gets me there only comes like once an hour. So if I miss it, basically like the whole day can be ruined. So yeah, it's just very different. Like, and I think one thing that might be hard as they plan this is the idea that like we're such a big city and different places need such different things. How do you make sure that sort of we're getting things equitably or like what specifically is useful for that neighborhood, for that area.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like when for people's benefit, we've been meeting with certain city council members just as a function of this working group, and yeah, every single one of them has shared, oh well, our district cares a lot about sidewalks, another cares a lot about parks, and personally speaking, it could be an opportunity because there are so many different needs that if we have a CIP, something that's organized and effectively delegates and allocates time to each of these various potential projects, like the city could still potentially address that. But without any sort of central oversight or any central plan, it's going to be, I would say it's impossible to happen as it has not happened yet.
I will highlight. I know Brendan's gonna move on to this in a moment, but like we have so much perspective and insight into what our neighborhoods currently are like and are not like are like and are not like that like you'd think that there'd be again any sort of like community voice part of this plan, and there is not one. When Brendan pointed to other cities who have done the CIP, they've had community advisory committees. There is not one attached to part of this plan. And so those 19 stakeholders that Brendan talked about on our previous slide are the only ones developing this plan internally without community voice. And even though Brendan just talked about city council offices that could organize people, um, or like voices and perspectives for their unique communities, they also have not been invited to this plan. It is just it's just the departments that are living within the city without city council offices, without community voices that are developing the vision for what the city would look like. I just want to note that. Go ahead, Ren.
Yeah, I think it's a good transition back. So come back into here. And so where are we right now? So as part of Executive Directive 9, the Mayor's Office established the Capital Planning Steering Committee. So this is a collection of various city departments and bureaus, primarily around infrastructure. And a lot of the goals right now are to, in essence, get departments to actually communicate with each other and get them in the process of working together. Also trying to create new processes to streamline capital investment, project development, and then at the same time, as they're working through this and developing the CIP, suggesting any reforms as it relates to city infrastructure management. But in our conversations with a representative from the mayor's office, and just in our conversations with community members and city council members, we've identified a couple big roadblocks. The first being what Godfrey alluded to, is that there's no real clear window into the CIP process for the public or city council. No one really knows what they're up to unless they post an agenda deck on their website. But other than that, the day-to-day work is kept completely hidden from view. Also, the city has yet to clearly define a series of actually, they have not released really any clear definitions. So when we think of the word infrastructure, that could mean a variety of things. We even think of words like equity or standards. These require definitions. But if there are no clear ones, it's really hard for us it's hard to align behind a specific vision. So until they actually get those definitions, work in progress is going to be slow. And then, of course, this big shadow looming over us, the city is focused, or at least the mayor's office is focused on the Olympic Games. And so there's a concern that investment will be tailored more towards the Olympic Games and just neighborhoods around venues and viewing parties versus actual citywide investment. And as Godfrey mentioned, without community input, we're not going to know what the city is up to. We're not going to be able to hold them accountable. We're also not going to be able to influence, maybe there are certain definitions that make more sense from a community perspective versus how these individual city departments and bureaus are thinking about it. And then, of course, from the perspective of equity, making sure that investment that is done through a CIP does consider the citywide or reflect the citywide perspective instead of just targeted funding towards Olympics Games related events. So really want to stress the importance here that people don't really know about this process. Work is being done in the background, but there is a big opportunity for the community to start to have a bigger say into how this looks. And we have good examples from other cities, not just around us, but across the US. So if we can combine the best practices that we learn on top of creating an avenue for community voices to not just make suggestions, but have real power and oversight in the process, we see that as an opportunity to create the best CIP for Los Angeles. And so this moves into what LA Forward's role is. So I can pass this back to Godfrey.
Thanks, Brendan. So part of the goal of the working group that our volunteers have created around this has been to amplify the opportunity here for other community organizations, community members, community institutions, associations, etc., to begin to understand what is possible here if we were able to get our voices into the rooms where they are mattering to influence this plan. So what I'm about to do is actually I'm going to call on people who are here today and who maybe are learning about all of this for the first time. And I'd love for you to articulate maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, like how important do you think infrastructure is to your community or like the membership that you represent? Because I think like, like I think that's sort of the first step. Like if it's not important, then maybe it's not important for you to take action. But if it is important, maybe we need to figure out how to get this kind of information into your membership and how you bring those voices out. I'm going to call people in the order that folks introduce themselves, but not the people who are here like presenting their presentation. So I am going to call on Mark first, if you are there and willing. Thank you so much, Mark. And I know Mark, so I felt okay calling on Mark. Mark, could you share sort of like based on like anything you heard here or what brought you here on a scale of 1 to 10, like how important is it to you or DSA since you're here? I'm repping DSA or in your neighborhood, MacArthur Park. And then tell us a little bit why that you think that.
Yeah, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like an 8. I don't think we have any projects running currently that have directly interfaced with this. So I think there would be a bit of time to kind of like build out infrastructure to directly engage with it. But I mean, one of the priorities that we've had, not this year, but over the past 2 years, was around metro expansion and trying to make that free for all Angelinos. Um, in MacArthur Park, there's like a lot of work to be done making the sidewalks accessible for a lot of people. It's like particularly hard if you've got disabilities. They're just kind of like torn up in a good chunk of areas. I think like kind of adjacent to some of the more like central infrastructure stuff, there's also just like a lot of need for services around here. And I think one of the things I've also heard discussion of is like kind of rejoining the two halves of MacArthur Park, so like shutting down the Wilshire kind of corridor through there. I think on the question about like what it would be like to have a kind of infrastructure conversation within the organization, I think that's something that we could kind of set up like sometime in the next few months. We've got like quite a few things going on right now. But I think having a longer term vision of what the city is actually doing and what it's investing in is absolutely necessary. And I think we see a real testament to that in the fact that the city has failed to have a sustainable budget, and it's prioritizing things that are not really like serving Angelinos. It's spending lots of money on private bank fees, on outside counsel, on like police brutality, and like failures to actually provide the kind of services and support that people need. So I think particularly also as like we get closer to the Olympics and as we see the kind of like devastating effects on the environment, like much more like sustainability in our infrastructure and support for like mass transit is like absolutely essential.
Thanks, Mark. I know that was like out of the blue where I called on you, but you had plenty to say. And so I'm going to go to other folks next, but just to like summarize some things I heard from Mark, and maybe these are places for follow-up with you or DSA. First of all, I saw that you have a MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council member in the chat box who just introduced themselves to you. They're here representing Thai CDC, but as a neighborhood council member in MacArthur Park, there might be like this really interesting conversation about how MacArthur Park like just by itself has unique need for community voice in the process where we're thinking about its infrastructure in the future. We know that gentrification often runs rampant in communities like MacArthur Park as well. And so as we evolve infrastructure, how do we ensure it also centers people who live there and have called it home for quite so long. The other thing I heard was like at DSA, it may be useful for this conversation to take place in relationship to transportation or climate related conversations. Sounds like really great entry points for this. And so like, would look to you to figure out where to introduce the conversation, because I imagine that there are folks there who would be interested in understanding how they could influence this process. Whether or not there's like a clear working group or structure there yet, there are other places where this is really great. Lastly, you're making me think of, just because I have familiarity with DSA, they're like, so think about the different geographic branches actually, and how each geographic branch might actually like have a different conversation around the CIP, and way to lean in there. So like I think there's really interesting follow-up points there. I'd love to actually go next to, only because Michelle in the chat box was like was like, I'm a neighborhood council person. So there's at least 3 neighborhood council folks on here that have introduced themselves at a variety of points. Because I think we have NoHo Neighborhood Council here. Jimmy is here, introduced himself next. Michelle said, MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council. We'll come back to Thai CDC in a moment, since we know folks are technically with their Thai CDC hats on too. But in what ways could neighborhood councils engage community voice, or have or lean into this? I'd love Jimmy or Michelle, or I know there are other neighborhood council members here. Tathier, I know, is downtown neighborhood council. Jason is on a different neighborhood council. Like, how do you imagine neighborhood councils playing out here on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how important do you think it would be for your neighborhood council to lean into this process?
I can say something. Let me turn on my
Great.
camera.
And
Hi.
thanks, Michelle. I know this is not the hat you were wearing, but since you volunteered it, I just wanted to bring it into this space.
Yeah, no, of
Mhm.
course. For a lot of folks, they don't know how to, learn about what is happening in their community digitally or in person. They don't know what meetings to go to. Sometimes their only outlet is their neighborhood council because meetings happen within walking distance of where they live. So neighborhood councils could be perfect opportunities for people to learn more, to plug in, especially if they sit on their land use and zoning meetings. I think us as neighborhood councils, we can submit community impact statements on behalf of the community. We could even set up our own workshops or community halls to really gauge what are the infrastructure needs of the community. Are you a pedestrian? Do you bike often? Do you take the bus often? We want to engage those folks to really understand, how do you navigate the streets? Because a person in a wheelchair will navigate the street entirely different compared to, a person who is totally able-bodied. They can just walk straight down the sidewalk, right? So for instance, MacArthur Park is surrounded by what's called a high injury network. Experience a lot of collisions, a lot of pedestrian and vehicular collisions. So finding ways to make the streets safer and more accessible for pedestrians would be fabulous. And I think people already, want to be plugged into those conversations, especially if it directly impacts them. So
Thanks, Michelle. We're gonna come back to Thai CDC in a moment, but but I heard you say very concretely, like there's like the lane use and zoning committees could be really interesting to engage here. I heard workshops of some sort in there. CISs, or community impact statements, are ways we can like send in stuff and support. We've met with different council offices, and there's at least one that is interested in figuring out some sort of way to get a bigger window into this process. Council District 4, Nithya Raman's office expressed that interest. And so like if they were to move something forward, it makes me wonder what window that opens up for neighborhood councils to say, yes, like we want some sort of voice into this. Feels like a really interesting strategy. Jason, and then I know there's others on here who are on neighborhood councils.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. I think an interesting thing is we hear at our neighborhood council about this sort of stuff all the time. People are always asking questions about my street light, my sidewalk, or why is this strip of road like so dangerous, or all these different things. But I don't think they think of it as like infrastructure, or the idea that there could be one plan for that. In their mind, it's public safety, or it's traffic safety, or it's whatever. Um, but I think what could be really neat is like to get some neighborhood councils in the same area. Like I've done this with Jimmy's before, where we set up a town hall, or we set up something that's like a co thing among like a couple different neighborhood councils. We invite our constituents. We sort of pitch it to people at our meetings, and talk about like what does infrastructure look like in North Hollywood, for instance, and what could we do to work with the city to make it better overall? Because I think at our neighborhood council, we often hit certain motions or like certain small bits of the problem. Oh, we'll fix this street light or this row of streetlights on the street. But I think the idea of addressing capital infrastructure citywide or neighborhood wide all at once could be something interesting to educate people on.
Yeah, I think if y'all are sort of getting a sense of this like larger picture we're trying to build, like there's an absence of a community advisory committee right now that is officially part of the mayor's plan. So we're gonna community and we're gonna advise is like what's happening, right? Like what are we going to do? Whether it's through DSA, its branches, or neighborhood councils, et cetera, in your regions to be able to make this happen. Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, building on what, excuse me, Michelle and Jason said, like having town halls or having organized events to say, hey, your street lights out, or hey, you don't have bollards protecting your bike lane, or any of these things, and then saying it's a symptom of a larger problem, and this is how a CIP will help you, and educating the public on how they can use that to then advocate with their council members. I think would be something neighborhood councils can and should do. I will also say, as the chair of our planning and land use committee up in NoHo, I did invite every single member, all the other 6 members, to join these workshops. And so take names if they do show up and let me know.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. And I think you got some thumbs up there as well. Um, as we generate these ideas, like certainly here at LA Forward, again, like our responsibility to the community is to bring this to you. Like this is sort of like the first point, like let's get you looped in, but we need your help to create these windows of opportunity in our community to bring more people in who couldn't make a 12 p.m. Zoom or just didn't hear about it. Right. Like you're connected to these spaces that are so important to bring community members in. We're looking for you to point us in that direction. If you can help take leadership in making those things happen by establishing that workshop, putting it on an agenda, on a land use zoning committee, like all of the things, like we're looking for you to take that leadership. If you need help, like that is also what LA Forward can help do, is like if you need a San Fernando Valley space or MacArthur Park space to like talk about this, let's figure it out and let's create those spaces. Tracy, and then we're gonna move on to different organizations. Tracy, are you on mute?
Okay, sorry. So for
There you go.
me, I was never really involved in any of this because I didn't know how. And I think the most important thing, like a couple you pointed out, especially with neighborhood councils, is getting your people involved. But a lot of people don't even know. I didn't until until the Progressive Campaign Leadership. I didn't know anything about uh what is it, neighborhood councils or any of those other things. So how do we, as this group of people, especially like those of you that are in neighborhood council, get the word out that there's even such a thing as a neighborhood council? Because I live in Encino and I still don't know what my neighborhood council is. I think there's 3 of them. So that's another thing. Some neighborhoods, because of the size of the neighborhoods, have more than one neighborhood council. And so I think when people, because I know now that I'm engaged, I'm excited and I'm volunteering and doing stuff, and I'm volunteering broke. So that's how excited I am about what I do. Broke volunteer, yes, that's me. But I see how important it is, and I think once people realize and understand just how important and how strong their voices are, look what we did with the UCMR, and we were all volunteers. So I think when people realize just how powerful our voices are, they will become engaged, but they got to know. We have to figure out how to get them to know what they they can do, and also let them know that just because they didn't vote for somebody, or they can't vote, they are still a constituent. I think a lot of people don't think that just because they don't vote or they can't vote, they have no voice. But yes, they do. They're constituents. So that's all I got.
No, that's great. I think Tracy shared some seeds there too for like ways we can get this to engage folks even more sustainably. Like even if they've never heard a neighborhood council before, maybe this will be the first time. Maybe if we put together some sort of like event, something about infrastructure in a neighborhood that is co-sponsored by a neighborhood council, attended by neighborhood council members or something, maybe infrastructure is the opportunity for folks to even understand what other bodies they have in their neighborhoods to be able to plug in to making our city and their neighborhoods better. Um, let's I've kept on like highlighting Thai CBC because there's at least two folks on the call with Thai CBC. How are you all thinking about infrastructure when you think about everyone that you serve in Thai Town, North Hollywood, et cetera, like other places that Thai CBC serves? How does this play a role in the work y'all do? I know there's two of you.
Hi, sorry, it's very loud in my house.
You're good. Thanks.
Yeah, with Thai CDC, we actually have this ongoing grant called Access LA, where we're trying to bring accessible mobility to different parts of LA. So that includes South Central, South LA. I know it's debated to call it two different things. I personally call it South Central because I'm from there. But yeah, K-Town, East Hollywood, Thai Town, East LA, like all of LA, because transportation leads you to different parts of LA. So it's important for all of it to be connected. So I think like the capital infrastructure plan and the disinvolvement of community organizations, especially when it comes to grants such as the one that I'm managing, it's very strange because our goal is to create things like mobility hubs and like more transportation options for people within our community. And like overall, this will benefit the entirety of LA, and it is infrastructure for LA. So it's just very strange to me.
It's strange to us too, which is why we've started to convene these calls. We're like, it's kind of like community gossip, but like in a policy wonky way, is a little bit of of what we're doing here. It's also intended to like literally draw the connections. Like y'all have a grant, you're already doing work. Why aren't we like overlapping this in the same conversation? Right? Like it's not even new work you all are doing. It's looping it into this conversation around a CIP. We just need to create windows to bridge it to it, right? I don't know if you had
Yeah.
anything else to add. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't really have much else to add aside from like the community organizations that I work with on this project, Access LA. We're already making our own initiatives to connect LA as a whole, but I feel this may just be like a personal feeling, like that's not held by the governing body of LA. But I won't speak any more on that.
And without speaking anymore on that, like what I imagine to be true is like at some point there's like some sort of like proofs or evidence, things that we say out loud that we're doing in community like matter and are actually taking root and moving. Like there's like I imagine we're waiting for some sort of like credibility signal. Like, yep, like the things that we're working on like matter and will be taken up as serious and implemented even. Um, that is theoretically like part of a CIP. It's a plan. It's like a program and a plan that says, here's how we're going to invest our money in these outcomes that will change our communities in these ways, so that regardless of elected official, regardless of the mayor, regardless of the council, our city has a plan to like get this to happen. And as Brendan showed earlier on like that San Diego slide, the even like the best possible version of the plan is when the public has access to it. Even like a plan that can be a good plan created internally as long as it represents what the community wants. Even better when you can see what's happening in your community as well and can get access to it in real time so that we know we're being taken seriously and that our neighborhoods are moving in the ways that we want them to move. I think we're just gonna like stop the conversation here. I called on lots of folks, et cetera. I know some folks have had to hop. But like these are the types of actions, like what you all have named as strategies cannot end as ideas today. Like we're looking for organizations, for neighborhood councils, or just good people, good people in your communities, like yourselves, to take this up in some sort of way as some sort of like like what is like the next step for you all to explore where this goes, because this can't end here, or else this is just going to happen without us. Like that's why we're having these calls. So I'd love to like open up again. Are there things that people in the room who have talked about neighborhood council or organizations or things like that, are there steps you're willing to take, even small steps, to like move this forward in your organization or neighborhood council, et cetera? Like what's like a thing we can follow up on? And I'm just going to say the names of the folks who we had in conversation, like Michelle, Mark, Chandy, Jimmy in particular. I know others have been, Corey, Jason have been in conversation, Tracy's been in conversation. What are steps that we can take to move this conversation forward?
I could bring this to DSALA's steering committee and
Cool.
we could talk about setting up some conversations in the branches to kind of get a little bit more granular, and I can bring back some of that information.
Awesome.
And I can reach out to you and we can talk a little bit more about like some of the questions that might be useful to kind of frame up those discussions.
Yeah. And to make sure that either you or others can represent that, or we're happy to like make sure we have a representative there to be able to share out the information and stuff as well. What about others? Thanks for that, Mark. That's great. I'm looking at something's in the chat box. Jason said bringing things to the neighborhood council board or do a town hall event or something. Yeah. The goal is, again, like without an official community advisory board, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And then like if it scares the city to be like, well, what are they doing? Good. Right? Like get them to do it. Get them to do something to connect the dots. So I love the idea that we're just gonna do it. So Jason, of course, is very familiar with LA Forward. He's an organizer here, and has come up through our volunteer ranks. But like what let us know what we can do to support an event and represent this information. We are uniquely one of the few, if only, advocacy groups getting in the loop here. But there is another group called Investing in Place that, from like a policy angle, has really leaned in here and can also possibly provide some resource to represent at various town halls and things. Jenny says, recently had a press conference. Oh my gosh, like yes, like what if there's like op-eds or like other press, if there's comms possibilities, like if y'all have social media teams that can be like, hey, did you know this was a thing? Like there are these like really comms magnifying ways to get the word out around this, to get other people curious about this. Any other ideas folks want to say out loud? And I'm going to pass things to Brendan to begin closing us out toward any other next step. Cool. Thanks for engaging, Al. Brendan.
All right. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing all these ideas and offering your support. Like Godfrey said, we can't do it alone. We're a small working group. And ultimately at this point, it's getting the word out and making sure people are aware, providing some of that upward pressure on the city to, open up the process and, start to work with us. So, I think we have some ideas shared in the chat about individual things that we can do with individual groups, but generally speaking, we have our working group meetings every other Mondays from 8 to 9 p.m. And so this is where we'll actually go into the details about specific strategies, specific tactics, what events we're going to go to, how we think about something that we heard from the mayor's office or along those lines. So this is just a great opportunity to, if not yourself, a representative from your organization or neighborhood council, to just at least listen in, or at least sign up for the group and be privy to any communications that we send there. And then Also, we're more than happy to, co-host a teach-in like this, but have it be specific to your organization. We'll have similar opportunities to participate, to share stories, and to really start to mobilize people and get them thinking about, what a CIP could do for themselves and their neighborhood. And then last thing here is just ask your council member about Executive Directive 9 and the CIP. It's, as I mentioned, we've spoken with about half at this point, half of city council, and some of them have heard about it. They received a presentation. Others had no idea. And almost everything we're saying was novel to them. But providing that kind of upward pressure on them as well, if we continue to ask our council members about it, they are in a position of power to then ask the city, ask the mayor's office about it, or ask the CPSC. So ultimately, continued participation, continuing to have these conversations are going to be the most important thing. We're working on, we don't have a specific timeline that we could share right now, but we do know that work is being done without us. And ideally, it's work that the city does in tandem with community voices and community input.